Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics! Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Ever wonder what that noise is? Ever do something you were told not to do, just for spite? Well, maybe take some advice. Ignore those ominous noises in the darkness of the forest, and ready yourself for a twisted tale that may just replace hindsight with foresight. Dissonant whispers in the northern woods.
I am a journalist. At least I fancy myself one. It's not a profession or anything. I more or less blog as a hobby. I suppose that was the original intentions of this post. But much more has happened than originally anticipated. And I suppose this has become more of a warning or a retelling for personal peace of mind than a simple account of mundane events that have transpired. There is nothing mundane regarding that thing, or my experiences with it. An experience shared by a man by the name of William Bartley, who I suppose is the source of where this all began for me. I traveled to the small town of Middleburg not too long ago. I was actually in the area to get a showing on some real estate. I'm currently in the market for a house, and had arrived considerably early before I was supposed to. This, fortunately, did not leave me waiting, sitting in a car, counting seconds until the agent would arrive. Gary, my agent's name, is apparently a kindred spirit when it comes to punctuality. This also meant I was done earlier than expected, giving me some extra time to kill. I saw some antiquated, cozy shops of all types when I had passed through the town to get into the outskirts on the northern side, and decided to backtrack and now get to know the little township of which I may end up residing nearby, a notion I have since cast aside. There's no fucking way I'm settling down anywhere near there anymore. But still, in the moment, and the foreseeable to come, I had ample time to become acquainted with my surroundings. I made my way back to town, parked my vehicle on the main strip, and walked about the place. An antique shop, a general store, and an older-style barber shop. Among the most unique sights to behold was an old, saloon-style bar with an accompanying inn on the top floor, all decked out with horse racing regalia. I would come to find out that this old village was once renowned for its horse races, but when the track went out of business, the town died with it. An old town had seen the comings and goings of travelers and residents for nearly 100 years. Enthralled and swept away by the romancing of history, I felt almost obligated to walk my way through those swinging wooden doors for a mid-morning cocktail. There weren't many patrons inhabiting the place when I walked in, but this was to be expected so early in the day. In fact, I was surprised to see as many as I did. 3 people sat in seats, drinking pilsners and ales and dark lagers, while a kind and professional barkeep worked to wash glasses and attend to people's ever-dwindling drink supply. Currently, he was looking up at the small hanging TV and talking with 2 gentlemen seated at the bar. The third sat in a smaller booth in the back corner by his lonesome, looking as if he could have been a permanent fixture there for as long as this place had been in business. "What can I get you?" the man behind the counter asked me. He wore a uniform, fitting for a time period long since past, serving as more of a costume in this era. "I'll take a summer shanty," I told him as I leaned over the edge of my side of the bar, placing a $10 bill down on the smooth surface to start a tap. The man popped the cap from the bottle and slid the coaster in front of me before placing the condensating bottle on it. "Haven't seen you around here before. You visiting folks or passing through?" he asked me in such a nonchalant way, as if he was used to probing at people who walked in here. It is a really small town, and I'm sure this guy knows just about everyone in it. And he asked, friendly enough, "Actually, I'm looking to buy a house not too far from here," I responded, taking a sip of my bottle and washing down some free peanuts. "Where?" the gentleman to my left inquired of me. Both he and his partner seated next to him were older, in their twilight. The grayer of the men sat closest to me, and he was the one who had spoken. I looked towards the bartender, just for a moment, to see where he stood in regard to this line of questioning, and he too had his eyes locked on me in silence, awaiting a response. Actually, the little farmhouse down on Ranchbury Road." "The old Van Allen place?" the bartender exclaimed in such a way that if he had a mouthful of his own product, he'd have spit it all over his customers at the bar. "Why would you want to go to that old place?" the gentleman next to me asked, and while he did, I watched his friend behind him turn and look at the man in the back. "Oh, I've always liked the country," I stated in a daze-like trance, noting the wallflower's pale face that had been better suited for a ghost, and wide, fearful eyes that locked dead on me. "Oh, I can think of 100 better country abodes to take up residence than that old shack," the second man behind the first finally spoke up, turning now to look at me. Over the course of 47 minutes, I learned everything there was about Larry, the gentleman seated next to me, and his good friend Garrett, the man seated next to Larry. The gentleman behind the bar I came to know as Butch, which certainly fit his character, but was also just as surely not his God-given name. And whilst I passed the time with this trio, I could not shake the unspoken man in the back, whom I could nearly feel burning a hole into the back of my skull with his burning, glaring stare. Being as early as it was, Larry and Garrett left to go attend to their daily business, leaving the rustic bar nearly vacant. Like clockwork, as soon as the other two had shut the door behind them, from the quiet of the corner, a voice I did not yet recognize spoke out. "Hey, you said you were thinking about buying that old Van Allen place, right?" I heard in a raspy tone, discovered to be spoken by the man seated by himself in the back. I of course found myself drawn to him, wanting to know what it was this man had to say. "Yeah, that's right," I said confidently. "Well, don't," he stated plainly. "Why's that?" "Because there's something out in those woods," he again said flatly, as if stating the obvious, like he was saying that the grass is green. "You mean like bears or coyotes or something?" I said, almost stupidly, like it was a legitimate question. But I felt what he had to say was more than that, and I instantly felt like an idiot for asking such a rhetorical inquiry. The man chuckled to himself. "No, not an animal. Not any normal animal, anyway." This response intrigued me further. "You mean like a Bigfoot?" Again, I felt this was another dumb question. "No, This thing's definitely not a Bigfoot. It's something much uglier, much meaner than anything I've ever heard of, other than what some of the folks around here tell about. I took another sip of my beer, feeling I'd humor this loon for a while. So, what's this thing look like then, if it's not a Bigfoot? I sensed my impudence showing through, and the stranger definitely looked as though he had noticed it. Well, most people only hear the whispers. And that's what it does. Whispers, and tries to imitate other people's voices. It tricks you. But some had seen it, and it's ugly. Almost completely bald, aside from a few strands of hair on its otherwise barren scalp. It's got a mouth full of teeth like a shark, but thinner, single-rowed. The thing's as skinny as a sick dog, and walks on all fours like one, but can also stride on two legs like you and me when it wants, and when it does, the thing's long fingers, that look more like talons, touch the goddamn ground. But let me tell you something, Sonny. You've never seen anything as dark as the black of that thing's eyes. Like two dark pits they are. I thought he was finished here, and I went to speak up, wanting to comment on how ridiculous this all sounded. But he cut me off. I know. Just an old coot sitting in the corner of some backwoods bar with some crazy-as-hell story to tell. Let me tell you something else. I've lived here my whole life, in this little speck of nowhere America, and I know those woods, and everything in them, like the back of my own two hands. Anyone who's lived here long enough has had some kind of encounter with that thing, and ones that pass it off are coincidentally what I'd call newcomers. Well, you have to admit, that is a pretty crazy thing to be preaching around. I bit my lip at my choice of words. I don't preach nothing. You believe whatever the hell you want to, but let me ask you something if you don't mind. How much you paying for that house and all that land that it comes with? Let me guess. Surprisingly cheap, right? I didn't say anything, but my silence said it all. That's what I thought. You want to know what the reason for that is? Again, I held my tongue, for I knew the rest was about to spill forth, and spill it did. Well, the last folks that settled in that house were found torn to shreds. They thought I was crazy too. I tried to tell them about the whispers that I always hear in the woods out that way, the things I've seen, and the way it rips deer and bear alike to shreds. I could emphasize to you how strong this thing is, how terrifying and insane, but it won't matter. You won't listen, and I can't stop you. A sudden fear washed over me, giving me second thoughts about this place. I loved the town and the house, but I wasn't about to move into a monster's den. And that was it. As soon as the word monster crossed my thoughts, I laughed a little out loud, knowing even then how foolish that thought would have sounded if spoken out loud. Funny, huh? The man said, and I suddenly felt pretty embarrassed, as he must have thought I was laughing at him. Well, have a good chuckle at this then, he said all of a sudden, pulling up his shirt just as quickly. Look at that, he said, but he didn't have to. I was already staring. From his left collarbone down to the near right-hand side of his hip ran 4 continuous scars, about 2 inches wide apiece in their center. It looked like a bear, larger than any bear I've ever heard of, clawed this man from top to bottom, and he somehow miraculously healed and survived. What the fuck? I muttered out in an almost whisper, It was then that the bar lit up with sunlight, and before I had a chance to turn around, and before the stranger had a chance to lower his shirt, a voice called out from behind me. "Looks like Daryl's taking off his clothes again." The bartender even had a chuckle at this one. "Come on, Daryl, put your clothes back on," I heard another voice shout out. Larry and Garrett must have been done with whatever they had gone to do, and hastily returned, at least giving me a name for this stranger. "Has he been giving you all kinds of crap about that house? Let me guess. Monsters, right? Call it what you want. That thing is real, and it killed that poor family. Everybody knows that." Daryl immediately responded to Larry's proclamation. Listen, Larry, I don't know about monsters, but there's something wrong with that place for sure," Garrett responded. "You've got to be kidding me. You two?" "I'm just saying, I wouldn't go there." "You're such a pussy. You really afraid of that old place? What if someone paid you?"
It depends how much they were paying,"
Garrett replied to Larry, and I could see where this was going.
$50.
Garrett responded, as if he was spitting. "Not even for just like an afternoon or something?" Larry specified.
"Nope, fuck you,"
Garrett returned without hesitation. But the thing was, Daryl was right. I was an outsider, and I'm not scared of monsters. Well, I didn't used to be. So it seemed like a no-brainer when I spoke up and said, $50? I'll do it." "No, this doesn't include you."
"Let him,"
Daryl spoke up.
Why's that?"
Garrett asked him, searching for validity.
"Because
I won't, and you two are both obviously too chicken shit, despite what falls out of your faces. I say, let him. He's looking to buy anyway." Larry considered his proposition. A moment went by before he responded with, "How would we know that he was there?"
"You got a camera, son?"
Daryl looked at me and asked. I nodded as I pulled my phone out and polished off my beer.
"There's an old graveyard about 2 miles back and behind that house. There's no road that leads there. You two know that. I say, he takes a picture of that place and brings it back. That's proof enough. But I'll bet you dollars to donuts he comes back empty-handed, chased out of there by that thing."
"Oh, bullshit. Fine. You know what? I'm going to take you up on this offer, stranger, and I'll pay you the entire 50 to boot. But not for your sake. For theirs. To show these two morons that there ain't nothing out there. Tell you what, you bring me back a picture of that old boneyard. Here, by sundown. I'll pay you your money. Deal?" Was he kidding? To me, this was just easy money. I tipped the bartender, bid the patrons adieu, just after I promised to return before sundown with proof of my venture. By the time I had drove my way down the winding road to the prospective house, it was already afternoon. I had a mind to stop at the local store and buy a few things, such as a bottle of water and a lighter to name a few, just in case I got lost and had to spend the night. I was pretty confident in my ability to traverse the forest and make my way back before it would come to that. I pride myself on what I call my internal compass, and foresaw no real danger in my exploration, figuring this would be a simple day walk, resulting in some very easy money. I charged my phone on my way over in the car, making sure I'd be able to take the picture that would provide me with proof, and had stuffed it into my back pocket upon exiting the vehicle. The brush line that bordered the backyard had grown thick and nearly intraversable, but there was one spot in the tree line where the tall weeds and briars appeared to be a little thinner, allowing me access to the woods beyond. Once I had gotten past that part, I found that this was actually the entrance to a dark forest trail, shaded nearly to the tint of nightfall by the thick canopy that swayed lazily back and forth in the breeze above. This is actually quite beautiful, I said out loud to assumingly no one, now surer of the benign nature of this location. I figured this to be the trail that would lead me to that old cemetery, and I neither saw nor heard anything dreadful or eerie. I found no viable reason for hesitation within myself. I made it a point to enjoy the tranquility brought forth by the sounds of forest life and smells of old timber as I began my trek into the shadowy gloom. It wasn't long before I noticed something horribly wrong. Like I said, I made it a point to listen and indulge in the calming mood of the forest via sounds and smells, and now everything had gone silent. How quickly a tone of the atmosphere can change from one of relaxation and zen to that of foreboding and ominous dejection. My ears pricked as my pace slowed. Even the air felt still and dead now. I kept moving forward, ever progressing towards my goal, but I didn't need the hairs on my neck to stand up, even though they were. I knew, felt it in my marrow, that something was erroneous. And that's when I heard it, right on cue, as if the world was listening to my thoughts, waiting for the opportune time for irony to arrive. That sound, more dreadful than I could ever hope to describe, crept its way through the air and into my ears. The sound was unhinged, without specific cadence, as if there were two whispering voices overlapping one another, but only while the other was silent, solidifying the fact that there was indeed a singular source. Like I said, impossible to convey for personal interpretation, but yet remains a noise I wouldn't wish upon the ears of my most foul nemesis. And even still, I only wavered for a moment before considering the possibility that I'd been followed, and now reside at the business end of someone's practical joke and personal amusement. "Hello?" I yelled out into the trees, and for seemingly nothing else to hear. And yet, the whispering stopped. It had been coming from behind me, and though I was turned to face it, I still walked backwards down the path, but less to get to my destination, and more now to get away from the source of that noise.
So beautiful,
I heard a voice say, in that most perverse tone. I'd never heard anything like it. Whatever it was had spoken words, human words, but there was no way that was a human voice.
actually quite beautiful.
I turned now, unwanting to discover whom this may be. Even if this was just a prank, I could very well be dealing with a bunch of crazed sociopaths instead of monsters, and I was actually more inclined to believe it a foe of human flesh and blood at its root, for the time being. But this didn't stop me from running. In fact, that was the one thing I seemed to be doing well at the moment. It's not like I had made the best decisions up to this point. I mean, who would take the advice and directions from a bunch of hicks that they had just met and agree to venture into the middle of nowhere? My thoughts were torn from my current focus when a loud shriek pierced the silent, isolated woodland, and it sounded as if it were right behind me. My God, what the fuck was this thing? I turned to try and gain sight on whatever it was that laid chase. I saw nothing, but felt the tip of my foot catch something in the dirt before me, completely overlooked in my panic-stricken eyes and observations. I swung forward with force and put my hands forward to brace my fall. But it didn't matter. Something bulky and cement was jutting from the earth before me, and the front of my skull connected with it, before my hands had even had a chance to touch the grass at its base. When I first awoke, I had trouble recollecting where I was. At first, I assumed I was back in bed, back in my apartment, and quickly found it queer that I was laying on grass. I sat to an upright position, struggling to see where I was, hoping to spark a memory, but everything was so dark. Then, I remembered. The bet. The forest. That thing chasing me. At the memory of it, my heart began to quicken. I hadn't brought a flashlight or any provisions, and hadn't intended in being in this foreign place after the sun had fallen. And the thought of whatever that thing was, and wherever it may be now, stirred a fear in me that nearly froze me in place, waiting for the light of day. But I had no intention on being out here a moment longer than I needed, and remembered the flashlight app on my phone. I stood to my feet and pulled it free from my pocket. Shakily fumbling through the touchscreen buttons and unlocks, I activated the bright light and shed revelation on the dark world around me. It seemed I had found the cemetery. In my haste to abscond, I neglected to notice a few small headstones in the weeds before me, leading me to trip over one and hit my head on another, taller one. Checking my head, I indeed sensed pain, but nearly no blood, so I knew that the wound had either barely broken the skin or since scabbed over in my unconscious state. I just wanted to flee, and I didn't care about a lousy $50 anymore. I scanned in every direction around me with the little brilliant cell phone light. But it was like the forest had swallowed up my path, or I had run off of it when running away from that thing. In either case, I was lost. I turned my head in the direction that the sounds of rustling were coming from. Something pale and large lunged from the nearby shrubs and weeds, tackling me to the ground with ease. The thing was thin, but so strong, holding me in place with only its 2 hind feet and 1 large claw. And that's the only way it could really be described. But this thing was no bigger than a man, but its finger-like digits were nearly the length of the thing's grotesque forearm, and this ghastly characteristic, although the most prominent, did not wholly comprise the unreality of the thing, for its eyes were nothing but sunken pits that dipped deep into the emaciated skull, and its mouth was wide, unhinged, and bedazzled with what must have been 100 sharp, razor-like teeth. And up close, the details of its form would make all who would gaze upon it assume that it hadn't eaten in a lifetime, for its ribs protruded nearly through pale, appalling flesh just above a gaunt stomach and waistline that would have made a Barbie doll jealous. I struggled with all I had, but all I managed was a scream for help like a wounded animal.
So beautiful.
It spoke through a mouth that barely moved at all, like it had coughed up the words. My instant of perplexion turned into sudden terror when the thing lifted its other giant claw, only to bring it down and rake it across my chest. I yelled out both in agony and fear of the knowing that I was about to die of dismemberment, maybe blood loss if I was lucky. I heard a loud bang from the same direction the thing had come, and in the same instant, the foul creature was flung off top of me. "Come on, can you walk?" I had no idea who it was that had come to my rescue, but I was thanking God in my mind that they had. I tried to get to my feet, but found my ability to support my weight severely hindered, and I cried out as best as I could for my rescuer. I heard more crashing through the weeds, and then a familiar voice before a gentle tug for helping me to my feet. "Come on, that thing's sure to come back." It was Daryl. As he stood me upright, I saw the shotgun he had brought with him, now being used temporarily to support his weight, as he supported mine. Thank you for... Shut up. Save it for later. We ain't through yet. Can you shoot? Yeah, I think... Take this. Daryl handed me the gun, having reloaded it immediately after firing it. I'm gonna have to carry you. It's a long way back. If you see anything, don't hesitate. Shoot! But I wheeze, starting to feel fatigued, which the doctors would tell me was from blood loss. But Daryl ignored me, wasting no time in lifting me onto his shoulders and beginning to walk. I bobbed up and down on his shoulders, wondering how I would ever be able to manage a shot, even if I was able to see anything. I heard that dissonant voice echo off the distant trees somewhere in the black. You see anything, damn it? I mean it! Daryl solidified, but he didn't have to tell me twice. I would use the last ounce of energy I had left if I had to.
Get the fuck out of here.
I think this is where I started to lose it a bit, weeping and such, but one should not blame for this imprudent state of being, lest you be subjected. But Daryl, he had a character of pure steel. Thank God for him, because if he hadn't taken note that I had never made it back, never decided to brave those woods once again for a stranger that he barely knew, who scoffed at his story, well, I'd surely lay in pieces right now. Needless to say, I never bought the house, nor collected the $50. We made it back to his truck, parked next to my ride, with the sounds of that thing chasing us the whole way. I had someone from AAA go back and retrieve my car. They didn't see anything unusual, reportedly, but the police made sure to investigate anyway, prompted by the hospital staff. I told them it was some kind of wild animal, for I feared they would think me insane and commit me. Old Larry and Garrett, and some other residents of that sleepy little town, might mock that stranger to me named Daryl, sitting on his roost in the back of an old bar and spinning tales for those who might listen. But they shouldn't. Sometimes, truth can be found in the most surprising of places. But if you're like me, these words, this story, will mean nothing to you. And just like me, you won't take the warnings contained within until you have a matching scar to prove it to you, too.
Okay, so the next time I think a prospect sounds a bit too good to be true, maybe I'll know it is. Because unless you're some hideous naked Talon monster, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Unless you're the lunch. But if you're hungry for more terror, make sure to return here again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.